This year we're keeping Good Friday in a way which we hope will be unique. We are unable to gather to worship, to walk in witness, to sing in a choir or listen to music together. But our isolation individually or in small household groups gives us a new perspective as we recall the progress of Jesus' final journey from the upper room to the cross. The crowds of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem have retreated, and Jesus' story continues with smaller and smaller groups, then individual conversations, until he hangs alone on the cross, doubting even his intimacy with God, as he cries in the words of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Last Supper is taken with Jesus' household group of disciples, and then together they move out to a place called Gethsemane. But Jesus' close circle cannot accompany him fully into his agony, falling asleep rather than watching with him in prayer. After his arrest, Jesus is taken before Annas, the high priest. Peter has followed him as far as the courtyard. He sits and is questioned, and Peter will deny that he knows Jesus. So on alone to Caiaphas and then to Pilate. Jesus is alone one-to-one with his accusers. The circle is getting smaller and smaller. On the cross there is a brief dialogue with the penitent thief. "Today," says Jesus, "you will be with me in paradise." Mark tells in his Gospel of the moment when even his Father God seems to be absent, and Christ feels entirely alone. A moment of complete vulnerability. And so Jesus finds himself increasingly isolated from his family group of disciples, from those who would cross-question him, and finally from his sense of the presence of God, a moment of absolute social isolation. And after 3 days, this isolation will be broken in a garden, one-to-one, when Jesus will restore himself to one of his followers, simply by calling her name, Mary. Allegris Miserere, a setting of Psalm 51, is a passionate one-to-one dialogue in which the psalmist speaks in great vulnerability to God. He is aware of his own sin and of God's mercy. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. According to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions." He is aware of the possibility of renewal and of a fresh start. "Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain in me a willing spirit." As we listen to this great musical work, not as we are accustomed, surrounded by others, but alone or in a small household group, we too are given the opportunity to meet with God one-to-one, in vulnerability and in hope, recognizing that Jesus in his passion came to a point of utter isolation, which at Easter would be broken by a triumphant restoration of community in the calling of a name. May each of us hear in due time our own names, called out of isolation by God's enfolding love. With the psalmist we ask, let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have crushed rejoice. Amen.